Justin Trudeau is in Alberta to discuss the record low oil price of Canada's oil with politicians and industry stakeholders. But he didn't arrive to much fanfare.
Build that pipe! Build that pipe! Pipeline! Now! Pipeline! Now!
This was the scene outside the downtown hotel where Trudeau was speaking at a Chamber of Commerce event. Thousands of pro-pipeline demonstrators shut down part of the city's downtown. Trudeau says the business tax breaks his government announced yesterday should help companies in the oil patch. And getting a pipeline built, well, he insists he's working on it.
The federal government is here to be a partner, to be part of how we move forward, and that's why the accelerated capital cost allowance and continuing to work on getting a pipeline built in the right way are two things that this government has done a lot of work on and will continue to.
Is that enough for Alberta's provincial government? What more may they be looking for? Joe Ceci is the Alberta Finance Minister, and he is in Edmonton joining us. Hi, Minister Ceci. Thanks for being with us. Really appreciate it. The Prime Minister says the accelerated ability to write off machinery and equipment that was announced in the fiscal update yesterday will help companies in the oil patch. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think there's some help there, and actually that was in response to a letter that I sent to the federal finance minister saying this would help our oil patch. But you know, there's a difference in terms of the amount of help they're giving to the oil patch and the rest of manufacturing throughout the country. So the accelerated capital cost allowance is, as I understand, lower for the oil patch, and that's not acceptable. It is a capital-intensive, equipment-intensive industry and needs all the help at this time it can get. That's the first time I've heard that it's lower for the companies in the oil patch. What are you basing that on? Well, that's the feedback I'm getting. We're still digging into the numbers, Vashi, to understand if it's equal, if we're dealing with apples and apples, or if there's some difference. But I can tell you that what we didn't see in the fiscal update from the minister is any understanding that crude by rail needs to happen sooner than later. This is not. We need stopgap measures to help us out with this punishing differential we're experiencing in this province at this time, and the industry is experiencing. It's not just the province of Alberta that is experiencing the consequences of not getting world prices for oil. It's also the Canadian economy. On the rail issue, Minister, I know that your government made a specific ask of Ottawa. Can you remind our viewers what that ask is, and can you tell us what the response so far has been? Well, the response it's not in the update at all. So, have they said it's coming or anything? That there would be, they say they're working on it. They're talking with officials. This would have been an excellent time when they could have shown leadership on this file, because frankly, the world and investment in the oil patch is suffering as a result of the huge inability to get access for our product out of the province. If we don't get access, we will be landlocked, but Canada's not landlocked. We should operate as a country, and that's not happening. It's not addressed in terms of crude by rail. It's not addressed in terms of other things that could benefit us, and frankly, it's disappointing. Some companies in the oil patch are asking your government to cut production. It's been more than a week now since I think they made that original ask. Have you decided what to do? Earlier this week, the Premier announced envoys to reach out to all of the companies in the oil patch to come up with a consensus around what we should do. There's no absolute consensus this time, and frankly, it is a pretty important decision we need to make, and we've charged those envoys with a quick turnaround in terms of their work, and the Premier will be probably announcing some direction in the very near future on that. How quick of a turnaround? There have been experts on our show, for example, who have said that the differential is so large right now that the bottom could fall out in the next 3 weeks. Yeah, that's a horrendous thought, but we know there is a crisis. We are operating as quickly as we can. There are people that need to be talked to. We have 3 excellent envoys who are doing that work right now. We're looking at all the levers. We want to make the right decision. It's just too important to make the wrong one. But I can tell you that companies in this province are, the energy sector is a lifeblood for the entire nation. the accelerated capital cost allowance helps us a little bit. What would have helped us more is crude by rail and the attention of the federal government on this file.
You use the word consensus when you describe the work of the three envoys. Are you unable to act as a province to make a decision on what they're asking of you unless you have consensus?
No, I understand decades ago, Premier Lougheed acted with some rudimentary kind of legislation that's still on the books, I believe. So there is that possibility, of course.
But I'm wondering, I mean, there is not going to be consensus. We've seen, for example, that Suncor does not want the production levels cut. Cenovus does. If you can't reach consensus in the oil patch, does that mean that you won't utilize that legislation you just referred to?
You know, I'm not going to presume what's going to happen as a result of the work of the envoys, Vashi. I think they need to reach out, do that work as quickly as possible, and report back to the Premier, and she will take steps, along with support of Cabinet, to work in the best interest of Albertans and the non-renewable resources we have here, which are going for pennies on a dollar right now. And you know where the money is going? It's going to the United States, and it's lining the pockets of billionaires.
And just one more time before we go, what is the timeline for making that decision? I know you said quick turnaround, near future, but as I mentioned, the clock is ticking. Is there, in 1 week, in 2 weeks?
Vashi, I'm not going to give you a timeline. The envoys need to do their work. What I can tell you is we are disappointed with the fiscal update from the federal government. More could have been done. It wasn't. All Albertans are disappointed. And frankly, this is not good for the Canadian economy. We need to act as a country on this file.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Minister Ceci.
Thank you.
The price differential on Alberta oil is a real problem. Because we're forced to sell our oil at a discount, Canada's economy is losing an estimated $80 million a day. That's unacceptable.
Canadian oil execs are calling it a crisis. Canadian crude is being sold at a $42 discount compared to world oil prices, partly because there's a backlog of it in Alberta and partly because U.S. refineries have shut down for maintenance. Then there's pipelines, or lack thereof. Until one is built, one of Canada's largest oil companies is making a surprising ask. The CEO of that company wants the province to intervene and cut production levels until prices rise. Alex Pourbaix is President and Chief Executive Officer of Cenovus, and he joins me from Calgary. Hi, Mr. Pourbaix. Great to have you on the show. Thanks for your time.
Oh, happy to be here, Vashi.
I want to start off, we just spoke with the Finance Minister in Alberta, Minister Ceci, and I wanted to start off just by getting your reaction to what he said on your company's ask, and that is the ask around the provincial government using legislation to cut production levels in order to help with the price differential. When I asked him to commit to a timeline or to offer something specific on a timeline, he said that the three envoys appointed by Premier Notley were working quickly as possible, but he did not want to give a distinct timeline. What is the timeline for your company?
Well, I think we've made it pretty clear to the government that this is truly an urgent matter. I've heard many different numbers bandied around, but when you hear numbers from the government of $80 million a day or $100 million a day from other analysts, by any measure, this has become an extraordinarily serious situation. And our industry and Albertans and Canadians are losing money or value every day that this issue is not resolved. So we've certainly put as much impetus as we can to get the government moving quickly on this, and it certainly seems they're moving with pretty good speed.
Help us understand in other parts of the country what quickly means. Are we talking days? Are we talking weeks? What is the sense of urgency, I guess?
I mean, I have been talking about this issue now for a number of weeks. The government has certainly been aware of it over that period of time. I hate to put a time frame on it, but certainly when I talk to the government, I think everybody is in agreement that one way or another we have to know where the government stands. And I don't think we have more than a few weeks to really get to the 2 or 3 weeks, I think, is ample time to come to a conclusion from the government side.
Minister Ceci also used the word consensus when he was talking about the three envoys who are talking to various companies in the oil patch, and I wanted to ask you about that concept because there is disagreement among the companies. I'll just read a little bit for you and our viewers what Suncor has said. Suncor, it says, has a spokesperson said, has no exposure to the differential and therefore shouldn't have to reduce its production. We upgrade or refine, the company said, over 70% of the barrels we produce in Alberta, and it should be allowed to they should be allowed to benefit from that. In the pipeline space, it has contracted that insulated it from local price discounts. What's your response to that?
Look, I mean, I think there's a very simple response to that. That we are right now in this province the victim of a 10-year, the world's slowest car crash, and that has been for over 10 years. The industry in Alberta, when faced with growing production volumes, has got behind a number of export pipelines. My company, Cenovus, is either the largest or the second largest shipper on Northern Gateway, Keystone XL, Energy East, and TMX. So the industry has been doing everything in its power over the past decade to deal with this problem, but what we have is a political and a regulatory failure, and that has created this situation where a very, very small amount of overproduction is causing the value of all oil produced in the province to be devastated. You know, and I'm sure you've seen some of the numbers, but right now, Western Canada Select, which is a heavy oil benchmark from Alberta, is trading at in the range of $10 to $15 US a barrel. $45 under the value of heavy oil in the Gulf Coast. And the obvious solution would be for a production cut. Now, as you've alluded to, they're the integrated producers. They have the option of taking this discounted oil to their refineries. It improves their profits. I respect that situation. They should be applauded for putting in place that strategy. The problem with it is their actions are not, or their refusal to cut production is not just impacting the value of their feedstock, it's discounting every barrel in the market.
I take your point, but I imagine a company that, like Suncor, that has developed a different production model would say, why should we suffer because you are? And I take your point that there is a bigger level of suffering, let's call it, going on in Alberta. But if you were on the other side, as CEO of another company that had a different production model, would you not be fighting back just as hard?
You know, that's a very good question. It's something that I have been thinking about for a very long time, and I have come to the conclusion that were my position to be reversed and I was on the other side of the table, I think I would be taking into account the impact on Albertans, the impact on Canadians, and particularly the impact on the industry. You know, when we're facing a problem in the upstream where we could potentially see cash flows reduced by 20, 30, 40 billion dollars, that is going to have knock-on impacts to provincial revenues, royalties, taxes, regional economies. For people to think that this is going to occur and there are not going to be impacts in terms of layoffs, other implications is just not reasonable. And I think in this situation, given we are talking about a incredibly small volume of oil, which I would be amazed if that production, if it were cut, would really have any material impact on the bottom lines of those companies. It just seems to me really hard to understand why they would not be considering the externalities associated with that decision. The
province is also asking the federal government to help expand the capacity by rail, to buy rail cars, to do what it can to do that. If that action were to be taken, would production cuts still be necessary from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, our company, and you may know this, it probably has done more on the rail side than any upstream company. A couple of months ago, we announced deals to move 100,000 barrels of oil per day via the two Canadian railway companies. The problem with rail is that it isn't, at least in my experience, the cars are a bottleneck, but it's not just the cars. It's crews, it is locomotives, it's the upgrades that CN and CP need to do to their tracks in order to accommodate these increased freight movements. And, you know, I expect we are going to see rail ramp up over 2019. Certainly, we will see our barrels ramp up by rail over 2019. And that is why, as I said, this suggestion that the government should consider production cutbacks, we see this as an incredibly short-term issue. Assuming that Enbridge's Line 3 replacement comes into service in Q4, and assuming rail ramps up as we hope it will, I don't think there would be any need for any action by the government to go any further than probably into Q4 of next year. But it is going to take that long for rail movements to ramp up.
Okay, I'm out of time. I have to leave it there, but thank you so much, Mr. Pourbaix.
Oh, no problem. Thanks so much.